welcome to Bitstorm, a comedy game design podcast by two guys who know nothing about comedy nor game design. I'm Ben Slinger, and with me as always is Trevor Scott.
Hello. I believe we're doing something a little bit different for the first episode of the year, 2021.
That's right. We did not do our Game of the Year episode this year, so this is our Game of Last Year episode. Oh, golly.
Yes, it's the GOLY. It is hopefully our new annual tradition of the first episode of each year will be the Game of Last Year awards.
That's right. So the way this is going to work is we have the Game Award nominees in front of us, and we are going to select some of the nominees from across the categories and essentially reimagine those games based on their titles as brand new games.
Yes.
We're going to pitch them as a completely different game with the same title as the game you probably know and love.
Yeah. What we've done in the past is we've usually taken our usual format and sort of said that this is a game of the year, or we've taken audience suggestions. This year we thought let's do something a little bit differently and grab from the game of the year. So this is the Game of Last Year awards, the GOLY awards. Let's get into it.
Do it.
Ben, you choose first.
It's the Game of Last Year. So yeah, my first selection is Tell Me Why. This was a game by Don't Nod, who did the Life is Strange series and a few others. And look, I haven't played all the way through it, but I played a bunch of this game.
I haven't played it, so
it's really cool.
And stop me if I start getting it.
On Xbox Game Pass, so no excuses. I don't think you will accidentally come up with the plot of this game.
So this is a narrative adventure where the only input that you have to the game is you can ask the character that you're talking to, tell me why.
So wait, you're saying you play a 5-year-old?
Why?
Why?
No, you're an investigator, and your greatest weapon is getting people to tell you why.
All right, I don't know that we need to limit it all the way down to like that's literally the only thing you can say, like from a gameplay perspective. But I do like the idea of someone who, like, their investigative technique is not to like necessarily find evidence and like make the connections. It's getting people to open up and say, "Here's why I did something."
Yeah. Okay. So maybe, you know, his introduction to the investigation side of things is he'll listen to a story, and then that's when you get to press a button. Whenever you want to, you know, you can ask more into something, and he goes, tell me why you thought this, or tell me why you thought that, and you can sort of pick out certain things within the narrative structure.
So this investigator obviously comes from a psychology background, because I feel like it's very much along the lines of, so how does that make you feel?
Yes. Well, I would love to see like a psychologist come at like investigating crimes and investigating more things from, you know, he's a private investigator, but he's coming at it from more of a
like insightful personal,
yeah. So he can sort of see when someone's, you know, trying to hide, you know, truths and that sort of stuff, or when someone's, you know, a little bit confused and has seen something the wrong way. So you can sort of, you know, delve deeper into the psychological sort of things within these people.
So, okay, I'm trying to think of this from a mechanical point of view, because I like the general idea, but obviously, you know, just having an infinitely branching conversation because you can interrupt at any time is technologically difficult. So I wonder if this is more along the lines of kind of how the Walking Dead games, I think, were one of the earlier ones where just saying nothing was an option in your dialogue trees. That this is an even more boiled down version of that, where there are certain moments in the conversation where you can either let them continue to speak or you can interrupt.
Yeah.
To like ask more questions. And so in some cases you'd very much want to let them speak, because you're sort of like, okay, this is gonna, you know, they're gonna continue down this path and they're gonna tell me more about this. But, you know, if they start going in a direction you don't want them to go in, or they start hesitating, or
they start tangenting. You know,
or they start
go on
getting
a tangent.
angry, or they like the emotion. Different things change. So essentially, we'd have these monologues almost that are branching based on the points where you are able to interrupt and like say, okay, you tell me why. Like, tell me what's going on there. It could be a fairly simple, sort of narrative thing.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of seeing this psychologist who has gone through like some pretty horrible stuff, and the reason why they're now a PI rather than a psychologist is maybe because of like a prior patient that sort of they got a little bit too involved in and sort of messed them up a little bit in the fact that this was a horrible person who told them all things that like they had nightmares about and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and
so some of this stuff can sort of bring back that almost that psychological horror, if you know what I mean. Like it's delving into stuff that he maybe doesn't want to talk about.
I wonder if this is an interesting kind of replayable story where you can play a completely like standoffish, just listen to their story and let them talk investigator.
Yeah. Because
you're too scared to like have it trigger your own stuff and bring up your own trauma.
Yeah.
And like delve into that yourself. And that's a perfectly valid way to play the game. And I'm kind of picturing this as just a bunch of cases almost that you may or may not solve. And that doesn't necessarily mean like game over. It's just like, oh, well, here's how you did on that case. And, you've got 3 to 5 of them. But they could play out very differently and then potentially affect the other ones down the line based on essentially how involved you get with that person. But yes, we could try to still keep it to this sort of one button almost of, oh, well, here's somewhere I want to interject.
Interrupt or don't.
Yeah, and it's not always the tell me why. Sometimes it might be, oh, like I relate.
How does that make you feel?
or even just like I relate to that. Like you kind of give them something back, and that's that's an investigative and psychological technique, but also it's bringing things up in yourself, and that could kind of lead to how much of your own backstory and your own trauma you explore throughout the game.
So that was somewhat my idea. Did you have an idea for? Tell me why.
No. I didn't have anything coming in, so that's fine. No, I like that. Yeah.
I know. I would just like to see a different person coming into a private investigator sort of role that isn't from like the detective side of things. The failed detective or the damaged detective who goes solo.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone coming from a personal point of view that they
I see this very much as a bit of an introspective game, a bit of a. It's almost just a story that you're being told in a sort of choose your own adventure sort of way, where, you've just essentially you get the choice of how much to get involved or not.
Yeah, and how much you get involved determines on how much of the personal story that you actually sort of get.
And look, I think if you just don't do anything the whole time, you don't necessarily solve any or all of these cases. You might solve some of them. Some of them might actually, depending on the type of person you're talking to, they might respond well to the silent, judging look of a psychologist, and they just spill the beans without you doing anything.
I just saw in my head that the quick mysteries from Rick and Morty, where it's like, there's a murder. Okay, I did it, and here's the handcuffs.
Yeah, exactly. You've got one
and
short
here's
one.
another.
You've got one short one that literally, if you just do nothing, they confess to the whole thing within 2.5 minutes, and you get you get the props for it. Yeah, no, I like that. That's
awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn.
Yeah, tell me.
So even though it didn't come out this year, I'm going to say Among Us.
Yeah, well, it was a nominee.
It was a nominee for like
Impact, I think.
Impact or best multiplayer. Best multiplayer it won.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it didn't come out last year, it actually came out, I think, the year before.
I think it was like 2018 or something. But yeah,
so it really came to the forefront of everyone last year.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a great game to sort of get into, but let's change the idea.
Of course. We're only going by the title. So Among Us, which, I mean, is a little bit tricky because it's a fucking great title for what the game is.
Yeah.
With the whole imposter stuff. So, yeah, let's try to shift it a little bit different.
Okay. So it's a single-player game
where
you play basically an imposter of a sort of like a thing-like entity. And your whole thing is to try and, like, make it through this narrative game while people are getting a little bit freaked out that, some people are going missing and that sort of stuff. And effectively, you're trying to get off the planet.
Okay.
And hide yourself among these people without being detected. And when you get detected, it sort of sets off some other narrative things that...
Well, yeah, I wonder if to move away from the tropes and the inspiration there directly of something like The Thing or Among Us itself, if you are a benevolent or a friendly entity that is hiding amongst humans...
Yep, but because they've all watched The Thing recently...
Well, and I think because humans are inherently xenophobic and if they see your true self, then they're immediately going to try to kill it with fire. But so it's a bit more... It's almost a stealth game.
So you still need to eat. And so your options are... And this is, I think, one of those morality sort of things that, in a short sort of narrative game where you can either choose to go for the animals in the pen sort of thing, or you go for other crew members. Like,
can't you just have like a hamburger?
But it needs to be raw and it needs to be fresh. Frozen meat isn't going to help because it's missing all those nutrients that you need from fresh blood.
I don't know. I kind of like this more of... because I mean that's very much the vampire narrative that we've sort of done before.
Yeah,
and I know I'm like blocking you here in a few different ways, but I kind of like this as almost a stealth game where you have abilities.
Yep.
But those abilities involve you at least partially taking your true form.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you are sort of trying to... I don't know, whatever your goal is, maybe it's like get onto the ship first. Maybe you have found yourself in like a space station where, I don't know, the rest of your family stowed away, but you're the only one who survived the, harsh blackness of space after trying to find your way somewhere on a cargo ship or something, and you've taken the form of a human and now it's like, okay I need to get somewhere safe.
So is it sort of like The Thing where you were frozen at first and then they unthawed you, an accident happened and you lash out and you accidentally kill a human and that's the human that you end up taking the form of? But from now on, you're having to do their job and try to like stay within the confines of this without, otherwise it's like, oh, this new doctor has all of a sudden turned up and...
Well, it depends on how populated this place is, right? Like, I kind of want to move away from the idea of the violence having occurred at all. And it's more just this story about this person, this thing, who is completely alone at the moment, to start off with. They are trying to get to safety. There may be... I mean... At some point, they may need to, like, reveal themselves to someone, but, like, how do you do that in such a way that it's going to be safe or that they're going to understand? And so it's more of a kind of... I'm almost picturing a Hitman-esque situation where you're, like, walking through this space station, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to need to get to the communications.
Okay, so you're saying space station? It's in space, is it? Like,
I think it
International
starts,
Space Station? Or
I think more, like, in the future where, like, a space station is kind of, like... a bustling, like a Deep Space Nine kind of deal, right? Like there's a commerce deck and there's spaceships coming and going all the time, and there's the section for the crew and
I was sort of seeing it on the planet, but away from like Antarctica or something like that. I was seeing it more in like a small town in like New Mexico or something a little bit dusty and remote, but then it can branch out to like a bigger area in the later sort of sections.
Start. So I mean, it depends on how you want the story to go, and how they got there.
I mean, it could be quite cool that you start in like what feels like a Western sort of thing, the saloon doors and all this sort of stuff. Only to when you get out of the saloon, you see a spaceship, just fly off into
Very
space. Sort of
Firefly
thing.
vibe could be cool there. Yeah. Look, okay, that's kind of neat. But again, I think you kind of just...
Because then you got that whole thing of getting off the planet first and then getting out of the solar system and then, Yeah,
you're trying to find, like, the rest of the people from your race or whatever, family or something. So, okay, I like that. I think you find yourself... and maybe you've forgotten how you got there, or maybe you don't know how you got there. You find yourself in this Western town. I think initially... you aren't in human form. And so there are these stealth aspects of looking around until you can find the right situation where you can, like, essentially touch someone or get a sample of their DNA or something. Or, I mean, it depends on how your powers work in that way, but...
It could just be all technological in the fact that, the batteries run out on your holographic projector. And therefore you've got to try and sneak back to... maybe it's after like a one night stand sort of thing that you're sort of having to sneak out. Like,
okay, actually, we could bring it a bit more comedic. Actually, instead of trying to go real serious with it,
he's covering up. His alien is. The face that's in his stomach with a dustpan lid and sort of running through this town and shit.
Well, so I had an idea then of, like, as a character creation sort of idea that you can take as long as you need to kind of go around this town and, like, scan people, and that adds, like, their potential features to your character creation. And then once you sort of get enough charge to actually reboot and recharge your holographic thing, like, those are the selections you've got basically to then mix and match between.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think this is the first time you found yourself amongst humans, though.
Okay, so is this a dude, where's my car
I
sort of thing?
Kind of thinking that.
in that you wake up on Earth and you're like, what the fuck is this place?
What is this species? Why is my, like...
Oh my God. I got so drunk last night. Oh, they made a carbon. Ugh.
Yeah. My communicator is totally drained. So is my, like, holographic projector. Oh, what the fuck am I gonna do?
And it's now all about from an outsider's point of view. This alien is among us.
Yeah.
But as far as it's concerned, it's just trying to get the fuck out of here. Like it really doesn't want to be on Earth, and it wants to trace how it got here. And what's actually happening. So yeah, I really like the way that we've taken this in the fact that it could be a real fun, like, dude, where's my car sort of situation. When you finally get off the planet and you get up to the space station, then you got some more breadcrumbs that you're following on the space station.
Yeah, you got to get to, like, the logs, the long range sensor logs or something, and like track down the specific signature of your envoy ship or whatever. And yeah. I think, like, when you're on Earth, it's like, okay, I need to find some way to charge up my communicator and my holographic thing, and then once you're able to charge a communicator, it's like, and like your own
dude,
sensors,
where's my
it's
spaceship?
like
Shit.
it's like, how the fuck do I get off here? All right, I'm actually gonna have to be a human to get onto, like, a tour, like a public transit ship, essentially. And so it's like finding enough, it's enough to know about how the ticketing system works on these things, and you have to earn some money to get a ticket or something. Like, it's these step by step to get to the next stage.
Oh, I really love this. Like, this is really cool. And so different from what Among Us really is. It's not about the killing or anything like that. It's literally about
That's it,
how
yeah.
you as an alien, get off this planet, and the sort of the bender that you had. And, it could be that typical hangover sort of situation that, you're on your buck's turn and you got to get back in time, and you got a time limit then. Like, you need to get back.
Whether it's mechanically or narratively, but I think you've got this time pressure. Yeah, that's cool. I really like that.
You know what I would love as like the final sort of scene when you get back? Your character who's been sort of bumbling along the way and is like, "Oh, sir, you're back." And you go to your coronation, you're getting crowned King of the Universe.
King of the Universe.
Or King of the Galaxy or something like that.
I thought you were just going to King of your species, but it's like, no, King of the entire universe.
It's sort of
my first decree, destroy Earth.
My first decree, let's bring Earth into the galactic, Universal Federation. Federation of Galaxies.
The Federal Universal Collection of something starting with a K.
So what I think it actually comes out of is the fact that you were celebrating your win.
You've been elected. Yeah, it's like
you've been elected. Like it's
your inauguration, not your coronation. Yeah.
Inauguration, because you've been voted by all the different planets.
Yep.
They sent their electors, and
the Electoral College did the thing, and even though, and it turns out actually you're like a horrible dictatorial person, and all the different areas are completely gerrymandered to your favor.
No, we've just spent all this time.
It turns out that you were on Earth because you wanted to bring them into the Federation because you know that they'd all vote Republican, essentially. All right, 3, 2, 1. Next thing. All right, so my next one is a game that I've quite enjoyed, and a lot of people have quite enjoyed, and I think a lot of people were upset this didn't actually win Game of the Year. And my game is Hey D's Nuts. Hades. Yeah, now, obviously, that lends itself towards, Greek mythology from a beginning, but maybe let's not.
Okay. So a lot of the Greek mythology and that sort of stuff, a lot of these sort of things like Jupiter and that sort of stuff became celestial bodies. I like the idea that basically Hades is the name of a planet.
Okay. I think Jupiter was the Roman version, right?
Okay.
But yes.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Basically, it's from another galaxy sort of thing, and they were running out of Roman gods, so they started going into the Greek gods.
Or it's just a world where the Romans didn't have that influence and to like co-opt the Greek gods, and so they used theirs instead.
Yeah, so I kind of like the idea that it's sort of like this planet called Hades, and it's basically about the goings on this planet, and whether you can bring in some more underworldy sort of stuff.
Sorry, I just looked it up because I was like, what is the Roman version of Hades? It's apparently Pluto. So now I kind of love the idea of like they got downgraded from being a planet. They're just like totally pissed off.
Yep. Okay, we can go with that. That is kind of cool. Okay, so it's this alternate universe where Hades was Pluto.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it's been turned into a dwarf planet, and
so the actual god Hades.
The god Hades is like, oh, so now all these kids aren't going to know about me. So he goes on a quest to sort of change
a teaching tour.
NASA's mind to whatever NASA is called.
Either
in this
that,
universe.
Or he goes on a quest to increase the mass of Pluto to the point that it reaches the threshold of being a planet. Or
Okay,
of
that's
Hades, I should say.
that's also kind of cool. Like he actually sort of goes there a la a Satisfactory style game and is trying to bulk up the
but with human souls. Like, he's like, well, fuck this. Instead of storing them all down here in the underworld, we're going to go up to Hades, the planet, and that's where the new underworld. My namesake. That's where the new underworld is going to be. And once we get enough souls up there, the planet will, increase in mass enough that it'll have to be a planet again. And then I like the idea though of it being a Satisfactory style game, but dealing with souls. Like, that's fucking cool.
Basically, you've got that sort of thing on the planet that maybe you're working on Pluto, this ice world, to sort of convert souls into energy, and that can help like increase the mass of the planet, and effectively you're trying to build up the planet because souls seem to expand like the size of things.
I think it's. Well, I mean, you've got trillions of them, right? Because of all the people who have died over the centuries and millennia. So, yeah. All right. So how does this work? So I feel like there's some central source, at least initially, of souls that are coming from the underworld on Earth.
Okay. First of all, how fast does sunlight take to get from the sun to Pluto?
Distance Pluto, distance from sun in light years, and no, not sun with an SON. It's about 4 to 6 light hours away, depending on where it is in its highly elliptical orbit.
Yeah, so I love that. Sort of like after someone dies, you've got 4 to 6 hours to sort of in game time to sort of set up the actual contraption to take in the next lot of souls and that sort of stuff. So it's sort of like a continuous thing of.
I do kind of like the idea of it coming in as a batch. So maybe it is to do with the light, how the distance, but it's also to do with like its highly elliptical orbit. There's only one point where it's like at the right point in its orbit compared to Earth or something that you can blast a bunch of souls to it. And yeah, they essentially, you've got like a collector there on Pluto, on Hades, which you have to distribute them then in some way and utilize them in different ways. And so you've got a soul to heat converter or something, and you've got ways to. So how are souls transported? I initially thought pipes of some sort, like they're almost a liquid or a gas.
Yeah, I think they're definitely gaseous, but of course it's so cold on Hades that they kind of turn back into that liquid sort of state. Like they haven't so when they come down to Hades, they turn back into like liquid state. So yes, you're having to pipe them places until you get to the point where you're actually able to then increase the mass and therefore increase like.
You've essentially terraformed the planet.
Yeah, you're effectively terraforming the planet. The area that you're around, like the ice starts to melt, and you start to see that there's actually,
rocky,
previous life and rocky
stuff,
sort of stuff that. And you can effectively start terraforming the whole thing and building it up into this new paradise. But the whole thing's powered off of souls.
Off of souls, yeah, totally. I really like that. And so as you build, you're essentially having to. I think you get to the point where it's like, oh, we can upgrade our soul transmission so you get bigger packets of souls coming through, and then having to. Upgrade your capacity of your outgoing pipes from that so that they can handle it. Because I think you get a pressure level on the pipes or something, and they can explode and cause problems if you haven't set them up right.
So is there a point where you find out that like souls are not supposed to be used this way? Like originally they were supposed to just dissipate, and these souls are actually feeling everything you're doing to them. So it's sort of like one of these things where, the Satisfactory, people have actually been sort of saying the amount of crap that that's actually going on this planet, like this, the Fix-It company are actually pretty evil, and they're.
Oh yeah, there's definitely, and I think it's certainly intentional to a certain degree in Satisfactory of you are just strip mining this place for its resources, and in the end, it's just covered in concrete.
Yep.
This tropical paradise, essentially.
So I love the idea that, you spend all this time building it up, and you built up to a certain point that it's all self-sufficient, that now trying to tear it down becomes very sort of knowing where to strike first, and
do you get the odd like demigod showing up to like bring their sister back from the what would have been the underworld, but they have to now travel to the fucking outermost planet of the solar system.
It's like, oh god, why did Hades do this? Like, it was so easy to get our demigods back.
I know, we just like went into the subway and went down the special hole, and now we got to fucking become an astronaut.
I know, there's something about that a satisfactory styled,
I love it,
sort of game where you're terraforming and actually bringing this place to life. So you're almost doing the opposite of what you're doing in Satisfactory, where you're trying to actually promote life on this. But the
problematic thing comes from the resource you're using to do it.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you can like click on a pipe and you get names flying by of all the people going through the pipe. I wonder though if we can make it. Maybe they don't get consumed. Maybe this is a situation where it's like,
the reason why you need more to do it is because these souls are now having to power more and more and more. So
like they and they go. I mean, and maybe they dissipate and in fact, maybe that's part of why what's being terraformed is essentially you're using them to power your stuff and to change things, but then sort of when they're done, they just like dissipate into the atmosphere, and that's what's actually terraforming the atmosphere in that way. But, they're able to, under the right circumstances, like reform back into the soul, the spirit that they were. They're just sort of scattered amongst the atmosphere then.
Yep.
So that you're creating this situation where, you're not like literally destroying souls, but you are like manipulating them to your own needs.
I think when you finally get to that point in the story where everything is sort of the planet Hades is now seen as a planet again. It's actually grown heavy enough and all this sort of stuff. But then you realize that the souls themselves are actually, they're in pain. Effectively, they're feeling everything that you're doing to them. So you're now trying to bring it down. And now you're, the security systems
you're almost
that you
reversing things.
That you've now got to try and reverse things, but you now
either that or that's the next phase. Is that now you start having to replace all of your soul-powered stuff with like a more like green energy, like an alternate energy source. And then you're building things to
but the ultimate energy source is actually Hades himself.
Well, I'm just thinking because then you've got like a whole other tier of production then of, well, now we've got things that like suck the souls out of the atmosphere, condense them back into their previous form, and spit them out, and send them on their way or whatever, or put them into packaging systems that get shipped back to Earth, or I don't know, like whatever you're doing with these souls, and the goal is to eventually get soul neutral, I guess. That's your real end game.
I love it. Soul neutral.
All right, give me your next one.
Phasmophobia.
Ooh, I didn't even see this one on the list, but
best debut game.
Nice.
For the best debut game created by a new independent studio. So, Phasmophobia actually is a great name for a game, but it could mean a lot of different things.
Well, and I think, the game itself is very similar to some of the stuff we were talking about, in part inspired by that game over the past, recent episodes where we've done quite a few on, interactions with ghosts and that sort of thing. So I think this is the opportunity to figure out a completely different direction. Now, okay, but phasmophobia, phasm itself means an extraordinary appearance or an apparition or a vision or a phantom.
Yep.
So to be phobic of that, is this, instead of specifically ghosts, is it like a phobia of sort of some sort of hallucination or some sort of...
Yeah, I think that this is sort of... I like the idea of setting it in a sci-fi setting. That maybe it's far future, you're alone on like the International Space Station and you start like hallucinating and...
Do you play a stormtrooper who's really afraid of
Captain Phasma?
Of Captain Phasma, yeah.
Yeah. That is kind of cool too.
It's actually a Star Wars game.
I found out something cool about Captain Phasma the other day.
Did you? Is it
her armor
is
actually made from, you know in episode 1 and 2, how they had that like mirror ship?
Yep. It's that same stuff.
It's that same stuff, but it was a ship owned by Emperor Palpatine that it was made from.
Of course it was.
From a Naboo, like
right.
mirror
because
cruiser.
Star Wars can't have any little detail that's not connected to one other major plot point or person.
Oh, of course not. But that's actually kind of cool. That that stuff is, the reason why it's so shiny is because it's from that Naboo.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
But maybe let's not go with the Star Wars thing. Let's go with a far future. But you can change it up a little bit.
No, I like
more
that.
than hallucinations and.
Okay, so maybe this is a situation of like space sickness or something, like being alone or like, afraid of things on this space station that you aren't sure are real or not. You're having these hallucinations.
Yeah, I think what's actually happened is you were in contact with Earth, but then there was a meteor storm, and for the last 20 days, you have had no contact with anyone else because they are still sending help up, and you got to this point where you don't know, is this like space sickness / space madness? You're starting to hear things. You're starting to...
Yeah, okay. I like that you're questioning... so you finally start getting signal again from someone.
You can be, but
you don't know if it's real or not. So it's this real paranoia setting in of, you get sort of, you see symptoms of the possibility
or whatever it was. That word has come into my brain. I seem to hang on, hypoxia.
I like the idea, and look, this
condition where the body or region is deprived of adequate oxygen supply. Yeah. So I love the idea of hypoxia sort of coming into it. That are you actually going through some sort of segments of the brain sort of dying? And that sort of stuff.
Here's the setup that I'm thinking, and this isn't particularly innovative. There are a number of games kind of like this, but it's a good setup. It's day 20 after, with no communication. All you've got is like your little kind of AI droid-ish sort of thing, right? Is on the ship. That's who you've been talking to this whole time. They're not actually very intelligent, but you've, in a very Wilson-like way, given them a lot of depth yourself. But something happens, and like the life support goes off, and you are without oxygen for, whatever the maximum amount of time is that is complete brain damage. Your little Wilson goes and fixes it and like revives you because that's part of their programming. They're essentially this emergency bot, and you're like, and tells you like, you were without oxygen for 7 minutes. You make sure to check for, you may experience lack of whatever. But then immediately...
But from then on, you're experiencing shit.
But I think you don't make it obvious, right? It's like you immediately regain contact with Earth. Like that evening, like very soon after you're revived. And then you start getting conversations and they're like telling you how to fix things or like telling you how to get this back up and running or whatever. But they start giving you like weird instructions, and basically you're creating a paranoia in the player of, wait, am I imagining this whole thing? Like, is this all in my head?
Yeah.
You know, maybe they go out, you know, you can't contact them.
You question something and they say, don't worry about that, just do it. And it's sort of like they push back on any time that you question something, and it's sort of like, you, sir, are an officer of you know, NASA. You must not question authority, sort of thing. And you're putting it back that, you know, you must follow orders blindly, and some of these orders don't seem right.
But what I like, so I think what it turns out being is that actually you're fine. But what's happened is there's been like a coup or something on Earth, and a you know, rogue faction has taken over NASA, and they're trying to get you to, you know, start
World War III sort of thing.
Yeah, like to like set up something in a way that's going to let them take control of like the freaking lasers that are in orbit that will allow them to just have complete control of the planet. But yeah, it's this thing of it's not obvious, and you have this thing in the back of your mind the whole time, like, is what is real, you know?
Yeah, and I think with the idea that because you've gone through 20 days of not being able to speak to anyone and sort of being in that isolation in that tiny little spacecraft. Yeah. You know, I mean, you could imagine a minute of sitting there with nothing to do. Imagine 20 days of that, let alone a minute. Like, that would, you know, start driving anyone insane.
Yeah.
And
maybe you give them a day. Maybe you give them a day to start, and like, obviously you don't do it a day in real time or even in realistic sort of scaled time, but you let them see that it's literally like, okay, like you get a dispensed food ration and eat that, and then it's like it time lapses forward like 7 hours, and you've just got literally nothing to do. You're just completely insane, and like maybe shows you these, you know, a moment that you might try to have a conversation with Wilson, but like
it doesn't respond.
It doesn't respond. It doesn't actually have AI in it to that point where it can talk to you. It's a tool. It's a tool. But just to sort of demonstrate, like, here's where this character is at this point. And then, something happens to then trigger off the life support thing and lead to the next part. That's cool.
And then, you know, how your Wilson character gains at least a little bit of sentience. It turns out that it hasn't. It's actually, you know, it's following along with its programming, and then it's, like, been hijacked to actually respond.
Yeah, basically, I like that. They've sent up a virus essentially to take control of Wilson and gaslight you, basically, to like make you think, you know, that you're doing the right thing. Yeah, that could be really quite interesting. I think you would have to put a trigger warning on it for people who have like been manipulated emotionally, because that's harsh. But from a narrative point of view, that could be really interesting.
Okay, I reckon there's time for one more each.
Yeah. All right, my next one. I'm choosing between two here. Here you go. I've got a coin, so I'm going to flip a coin because I just happen to be playing with one. Heads is the first one. All right, it's tails. So this is another one that's on Xbox Game Pass, so if you haven't played it, check it out. I've played it a little. Spiritfarer.
No, I didn't even know that this one... What did it win?
It was nominated for maybe Best Indie or something, I think. Games for Impact, it was nominated. And for Best Indie. Yeah. So, for those who don't know, including Trevor, the actual game, and not to go too deep, and again, I haven't played it that much, so I don't know, but you essentially play someone who is sort of in the afterlife world kind of thing, and you are building up your ship that goes from place to place, like a boat.
Okay.
Bringing on different spirits who are, I think, often people you knew in your previous life, and it sort of gives you some backstory about who you were before this. And it's a bit of a maybe a bit of Metroidvania-ish / Stardew Valley-ish, because you can build all these different things on your boat, like gardens and houses for the different people.
Is it kind of similar to Raft then, if you've seen that?
Not quite, because that Raft is much more of a survival like more of a traditional survival thing. This is more, sort of closer to Stardew Valley, where but you're building all the stuff on your boat. It's got a nice little build system where you can just you just build upwards, and it's a side scroller platformer, so it's
nice.
But obviously we're not going to use the actual game itself.
Sometimes it's good to know where we're coming from, and then go Spiritfarer. So this is all about Sharon ferrying people across the river Styx.
We did that one,
and I realise that we've done that. But I know I kind of do like the idea of it's sort of like
fair, like Spiritfarer definitely made me think of like the public transit system for ghosts. Yeah. Now, is that how they get around just to all their hauntings, or is it how they?
Okay, what I kind of like is Earth as we know it is like, one plane of existence, and when you die, maybe you go into this other plane of existence. So, the hell on Earth sort of scenario is more the fact that, in this dimensional plane, hell is other people basically. Mm-hmm. In this, when you cross over, like, effectively you're now living in this same built world, but you have no control over how it's built. Effectively, you're just having to react.
But all the other spirits are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no interaction between the worlds. It's just effectively the public transit system and all this sort of stuff that you go around and effectively God is in this huge tower sort of thing that has been built in New York City or whatever it is, and it's basically at the top of the Empire State Building or whatever the tallest building is there, and
Okay. I'm getting some interesting vibes from this.
You can take it. I don't know. Like, you can take it or leave it.
No. I like that. I like that. I like the idea of, just from a visual standpoint in a game, being able to see the entire physical plane of existence with all the people and stuff, but using shaders and colors and stuff that it's very dulled out and in the background, and you almost completely ignore it. So you're just constantly like walking straight through people, and you get to the point in the game where it's like you barely even notice you're doing it, because you're sort of, the way the game has done its shading and colors is you mostly just see your plane.
Yeah.
And obviously the buildings and the physical stuff is all generally in the same spot, except for anything that's been created in this spirit world.
Ooh. Because there's nowhere for spirits to go. Basically, there's no afterlife, there's no nothing. This is all they've got. Yeah. Basically, there are so many people here that anytime that someone dies in a house and that sort of stuff, they kind of have to end up moving into that house. And, finding spaces to actually sleep and all that sort of stuff. And if this property's been around a long time, like, you could actually see, hundreds of people in this one building all trying to find, like, a little spot for them to sort of sleep that isn't
well, when you said God was up in his, like, high tower, I definitely started thinking, like, oh, okay. So most of the world is essentially ghost slums. Because they have nowhere to go. They're just forced, into these houses and stuff. But I think there is this, like, upper class of, spirit, whether it's God or whoever is running the spirit, where, they all live in, like, the top of all the towers, and they've got these huge apartments that they're not sharing with anyone. They're essentially the 1%, and you've got, a whole...
Everyone else that has ever died is basically, like...
is down on the ground, crawling over each other, essentially trying to fight for the scraps, and they can't die again, so they're just miserable.
And the scraps being, like... It basically... the only thing that happens if you don't get like the ghost sustenance, as it were, like, is you start to become sort of emaciated, and you get that real thin, gaunt sort of thing.
Well, and almost that classic ghost look of that kind of that creepy, bony looking ghost. But it's literally like those ghosts are because God's not giving enough sustenance to the people. I like that a lot. All right, so I think the story then is of someone who they die and, sort of obviously find out about this situation. And then the story is them essentially trying to like rally the populace to a revolution, basically, to take down the 1% who is ruling over everyone,
who are still oppressing after all this time. They're basically still oppressing everyone else.
Yeah, but interestingly, it's not necessarily the same people. Like if you're one of the 1% when you're alive, that doesn't that influence doesn't come over. There's a different currency in the afterlife, whatever that is.
This is basically the god as such. The self-proclaimed god and his denizens of angels and that sort of stuff that sort of have taken the
you find out that they're just people who have like seized the source of ectoplasm or whatever it is that ghosts need to survive, and are hoarding it in the same way that capitalism hoards money.
I mean, what you could actually find out is they closed the gates to the actual afterlife.
Oh, so there actually is somewhere to go.
There is somewhere to go. It's just that they were closed off because they wanted to capitalize on, like they liked what they were seeing, and they've sort of
or it's like half built. There was like a previous administration, essentially. There was previous people in power where it was much
never
more
meant to house this many people.
Yeah,
and sort of,
and they haven't put.
They took all the funds required.
Yeah. They haven't put resources into infrastructure, and so too many people are making use of this planet, essentially.
And then when you do finally...
That's actually what Mars was built for.
When you do finally open it all up to cross over, then it just becomes the good place, effectively.
Right.
That you can choose to leave and choose to end.
Yeah, it actually lets you, like, control your environment and that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's coming back to an idea that we did actually have in the past, where ghosts have been held on the planet involuntarily, and then finally, they sort of get released when they stop this technology.
Remember, was that the city?
It was all about mobile phones and all the technology interfering with the whole thing, and that's what actually caused ghosts.
I don't remember that one, but this is different enough.
Yeah, different enough. Okay, so it looks like I've got to choose my last one.
Yeah. Last one of the episode, I think.
And I wasn't sure. I did have an idea. Okay. I'm gonna go for Grounded.
Oh, okay. Yep. This was
This could just be a joke one, and it could be over in like 2 seconds, and it's all about a young, like slightly preteen who just got grounded by his parents, and it's just him sitting in his room. No toys.
Well, I like that as a that could be an interesting little single room narrative adventure.
Yeah,
actually, you're a teenager who has been grounded, and you're having to like find ways to either communicate with your friends or escape, or whatever, or both. Yeah, you've like it's things like they let you have your phone, but they've turned the Wi-Fi off, and they know that you're out of credits or something, or you're out of like data. And so it's ways of like finding an old SIM card or something, or.
But you know what? I'm going to call that a joke one, and the real one that we're going to go with is Ghost of Tsushima.
Okay, it's a very ghosty episode. There are like ghost games, but that's all right.
In this case, because we don't know what Tsushima is, I'm thinking that Ghost of Tsushima is basically, it's a sushi cooking game.
It is kind of hard to say. So yeah, we can rename it Ghost of Sashimi,
Yep.
and is this what happens to the fish after they like?
No. So I think you are being taught, I think this is a VR sort of thing where you've just opened up a sushi restaurant that your granddad, started.
Yep.
And as you go to start making it, your granddad actually turns up beside you, and he becomes your like mentor in how to actually plate it all up.
Okay.
So he is the god of the ghost of sashimi,
the god of war,
ghost of sashimi.
Okay, yep. Ghost of Sashimi. All right, so I don't know how to make sushi or sashimi, so we'll have to. I mean, there's rice and seaweed involved.
There's
often.
filleting. There's lots of pretty cool things that you can do.
Okay, so is this become essentially like a VR cooking game?
Yeah, a VR cooking mama, but with sushi as the main.
Okay. Do we bring in narrative elements with your grandfather then, who is teaching you, and you find out his backstory? Here's when I came up with the recipe for the
teriyaki chicken sushi roll.
Yeah. I don't even eat sushi, so I couldn't even pull the name of one.
And it's like, we find that the Westerners love this sort of stuff. They don't really love the...
Yeah, it's totally about this Japanese guy coming over to America and, like, appealing to their tastes. And it's his dilemma of selling out versus, his own culture versus making money in America, struggling with his legacy.
But I don't know. I think there could be a bit of stuff in here in the fact that, you're trying to find out what actually happened to your grandfather. Like, he's kind of hazy about his past. Yeah. All he knows that, he woke up one day and he was a ghost. And you're the first person in the family that he's actually been able to talk to. In the years since he passed, because like you're the first one who's taken up the mantle of sushi chef. So is it this thing where it's sort of like the will had been lost and then finally read, and then turns out that this sushi knife that he actually had has been given to you, like gifted to you. And it's all about the fact that the ghost is actually somewhat entangled with this knife.
Yeah, that's cool.
Not in the fact that he was killed with the knife. It's just this was his prized possession sort of thing.
Course. No, I don't think he needs to have died violently or anything like that. Again, I feel like this is a somewhat introspective game and just more telling his story and learning about your own character in different ways and connecting with someone.
While having some awesome sushi adventure along the way.
Well, that's it. Through fun mechanics of learning, rolling seaweed and filleting fish and
making different sauces and cooking rice and trying to appeal to the Western palate as well.
Well, maybe that's a decision that you make.
Do you want to go traditional? Do you want to go Western?
You want to sell out? No, that's cool. That's cool. All right, I reckon let's do one more. Let's finish off with one more.
You do one more.
It won't be too long, but we did talk about this one sort of before we started it, so I like the idea of where we could go with it. Animal Crossing New Horizons.
I forgot that we talked about this.
Now, we did mention this as essentially Frogger made new. So I'm picturing Frogger, but like on a spherical like world, like kind of a Mario Galaxy X thing where you can see the horizon, and so you can't see what's coming necessarily.
Okay, so the original game of Frogger, like basically, if I remember rightly, the story was more around while I don't know the frog was in some sort of hibernation or something like that, and came to be, and they built a massive 6-lane highway in between where he was in a swamp.
I didn't even know there was a backstory.
I believe there was something like that.
A frog getting across a road and a river.
Yeah. So I like the idea that basically this is a new super highway or something like that, and effectively, or maybe it's on a new planet. And that's why it's spherical. They've sort of. I'm imagining now all these different animals crossing, because it says animal.
It
crossing.
Is Animal Crossing. It's not just frogs.
So it's kind of like Crossy Road Galaxy, if you know.
Yeah. So are we adding anything to the gameplay? Or is it straight up?
Yeah, there's a narrative mode.
4 directions. You can talk to people. There's conversation trees.
There's conversation trees.
But you have to click through them real quick, otherwise you'll get hit by a space car.
Yeah, exactly. I think all these different animals are trying to live their life, but because the entire planet has been turned into this massive.
Connected
intergalactical highway sort of thing.
Yeah.
That you're dealing with planes going through at light speed and that sort of stuff. So by the time that you see them coming, you've already been turned into mush.
Come on. I just had an idea though, because we talked about Animal Crossing, that you start as the frog or frog-like creature or frog bot or something. I don't know, whatever. You're crossing the road and then you get to the median. Or one of many medians, and you find the penguin.
Yep.
Now you've got 2 animals that you have to stop from getting squished. And essentially this has now become Frogger crossed with snake. Every time you pick up more animals, you're getting higher scores, but it's harder to dodge all the stuff because... it's not just, move up 1 to get out of the way of an oncoming car. It's like, oh shit, move up 1 and move 5 to the right to get them all off that lane while still avoiding the other vehicles because you've got 5 animals behind you. I think that could actually work kind of well.
Yeah, and I think you got some narrative stuff happening in between that,
Oh, yeah.
The idea being that, you just got to get your one animal across, and it's not quite the difficulty of your Crossy Road or anything like that. It's more around once you start getting more and more and more, trying to keep them all alive and move forward enough and keep them all moving.
Maybe
within
it is
the
that
time
you can get them to their destination, and then you lose one off the end. So it's not Snake where it's you're literally endless every time you pick something up. But you do get score multipliers for the more you have. So I'm sort of picturing almost levels, and they are these spherical levels where you've got, okay, this level has 4 animals on it, and you can take them one at a time and help them home one at a time if you like. Mm-hmm. But you won't get, the high score because the high score is basically, spend as much time getting around with 5 different animals as you can, which is way more difficult.
Yeah.
And then drop them all off at their homes one by one, and then it's okay, teleport to the next planet. So a bit more of an arcadey sort of thing. But you could have narrative stuff in there as well, explaining things along the way where it's you meet this particular animal and they tell you what's happening on their planet or, how they got lost.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool idea.
I think, yeah, and that'll be a fun one to prototype, Frog across with Snake. I feel like that's one that hasn't been a combination of classic gameplay that hasn't been explored. All right. Well, I think on that note we'll end our episode. GOLY, we got through a bunch of games for Game of Last Year, our new annual awards show. So, yeah, thanks for joining us this week on Bitstorm. If you want to find us online, you can go to podchaser.com/Bitstorm, find all of our previous episodes there, including our previous Game of the Year episodes where we, as Trevor said earlier, took suggestions from our listeners for ideas for made-up Game of the Years, as well as all of our other shows.
Yeah.
And we're also part of the 8-Bit Collective, and this is a group of podcasters who are doing podcasts around gaming and pop culture and a lot of other things. So go and check them out at 8bit.net.
We'd also like it if you could check out the Australasian Gaming Podcast Network, a group of awesome Australian gaming podcasts. You'll find news, reviews, some weird and wonderful podcasts like Platforms and Pitfalls. They've been on our podcast before. So go check them out. Look for the Australasian Gaming Podcast Network on Facebook or at AGP Network on Twitter. And finally, we'd like to thank Kudos for the use of the song Mount Defiance off the album Containment Failure.
That's right. So thank you again for joining us this week on Bitstorm. I'm Ben Slinger.
I'm Trevor Scott.
And I think Disney movies would be a lot different if the dog was named Hades.
Come here, Hades. Help me bring these souls to the underworld.